Hello, I am Betsy Johnson, Assistant Curator here at the Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden in Washington, D.C., and it is my privilege to welcome you to today's discussion with very inspiring artists, Deborah Roberts and Cleo Wade. Thank you to Deborah and Cleo for being with us here today. A little bit of housekeeping first. ASL is provided today in Zoom. Part captioning is available across all platforms. Additionally, the captioned recording of this program will be made available on our website and on our YouTube channel following the program. If you would like to ask Cleo or Deborah a question, please type it into the Q&A in Zoom. Finally, before we begin, I would like to acknowledge Veuve Clicquot, the Grande Dame, for their generous support of this important program and of the exhibition One with Eternity, Yayoi Kusama in the Hirshhorn Collection, which I had the privilege of curating. As many might know, Yayoi Kusama is one of the most prolific and inspiring artists of our generation. She is perhaps best known for her infinity mirror rooms, but she is also celebrated for her paintings, sculptures, performances, and poetry. She has always been open about her experiences with mental illness and the powerful healing effects that art has offered her in her life. Our current exhibition features 5 works by Kusama that are in the Hirshhorn's permanent collection, 2 of which are dazzling infinity mirror rooms. It is a love letter from the Hirshhorn to this visionary artist, professing our dedication to share her powerful message with all of you. Today, we will touch on some of the transformative and healing powers of creativity. Deborah and Cleo make different kinds of creative gestures. Deborah uses the power of images. Cleo most often uses the power of words, but through their work, they each share a message of hope, resilience, and a greater future for women and people of color. Deborah Roberts creates powerful collage portraits of girls and boys in an effort to challenge standard ideals of beauty and emphasize the important message. And as I quote, every child has character and agency to find their own way amidst the complicated narratives of American, African-American, and art history. Cleo Wade's popular Instagram account and published books are full of poetry, affirmations, and illustrations that encourage readers to remain hopeful through the challenges of daily life. Deborah and Cleo, thank you so much for being with us today. Please turn on your cameras and join me now. Hello.
Hey.
Hi.
It's so great to have both of you here. So I think what I wanted to start with was one of the reasons this is so great is that Cleo, actually, you wrote a beautiful poem that was inspired by Yayoi Kusama's work and ethos. Your poem's called What Comes After Darkness. Can you explain how you came to writing this poem and what that process was like?
Well, hi, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for having us here. It's such an honor, and especially to be doing this with Deborah, who I'm such a massive fan of. I can't actually handle being here right now. When I wrote this, I really wanted to acknowledge the light that Kusama has found in darkness, and how light is actually, I feel, this force that is always ready to be present. And so I really wanted to kind of write something where you could feel the spontaneity of light and how quickly and in all of the moments in which you can find it, in all of the varied manifestations of how that kind of joy, lightfulness enters the body, the realm around us, and is this kind of ever-present force in our lives, no matter what, even when we feel that it cannot be found or it is not within us or around us. I feel that it is always waiting to kind of burst through the seams of our reality. And that type of commitment to hope is really what I wanted to kind of push into the feelings of this poem, and that's the inspiration. So it's music and it's dancing and it's the body and it's a hand holding you. And I hope it could be a kind of trigger memories that can overcome the reader to make light feel present now.
Your words and drawings have been such an inspiration and a beacon of hope for so many people across the world, especially during the pandemic. So thank you for that. I think, this has been a really challenging time for many around the world. And one of the amazing things about art is that artists through their art can provide, an alternative frame or an alternative way to see. And we can kind of join you to kind of look outside of our experience and feel more united, even when we're in isolation. Deborah, your works do a similar thing. I've always found your work to be so captivating, and we're lucky. We were so thrilled to bring a remarkable piece of your work, fighting theism, to the Hirshhorn Collection. And we're thrilled that we're going to be putting it on view very soon in an upcoming exhibition of work by all women and non-binary artists. Can you tell us a little bit about your process and how you started making this kind of work?
Well, my whole idea was that I thought that people was seeing Black people, Black children in particular, as these adults and not really children. And also looking at Black people in this monolithic lens, that we were all just this one thing and nothing else, when we were multiple things. So I remember when I was in grad school at Syracuse, creating these works, and it's just so accident. I was working with one face. I had cut out several other faces that were going to go onto different works of art, and somehow I just all kind of blew together. And I was like, this is it. This is what I've been wanting. And so I started cutting and ripping faces and putting them together to create one face. So at that time, and still a little bit, I'm still trying to make the viewer see one face, but in multiple faces. So it just became so important to talk about the richness and the fullness of Black people. And I thought collage was the best way to do it.
Where do you source the images that you use in your collages? Is there a specific sort of place that you go to, that you turn to again and again, or are you just finding them? Are you one of those people who just snaps, cuts out images everywhere you find them in daily life and then uses them? Or is there? Just because now I can't really tell everyone where I source imagery, but Chloe, she doesn't know this, but she posted a picture of her father one time, and he had his fist out and he was doing something like this. And that is in at least 8 of my works. And so we do have a connection. You didn't even know it.
Oh, I can't even tell my narcissist dad that right now. He will just, I'll never hear the end of it forever.
He's going to say, which works? And they're all sold.
We'll be looking forever now.
Yeah, they're all sold. But it was this opportunity. Sometimes I just look, and if it's a face that carries a lot of innocence and love and hope, I always make that the base of my faces. And then I put other faces on top there to build that face. So it always began with this idea of hope in the face of a child.
And I love that, that you recounted finding that gesture, because gestures are so powerful, and there are certain gestures that are repeated again and again, and we can kind of see them, and they carry a certain symbolic resonance as a result, I think. And you can see that, I think, in this lovely one where we're seeing all kinds of gestures, right, that these children are utilizing. I mean, one of the really nice things, it's so special when we have these programs with 2 artists who have such kind of love and respect for one another, and who have taken inspiration from one another. Cleo, I was wondering if you might speak a little bit to what you have found inspirational in Deborah's work.
Pressure.
We always, something that I think comes up in art a lot is the idea of escape. So we'll say about whether it's, my husband might talk about it with one of his films, and it'll be like, we wanted to create this escape from reality. And we often talk about what we're escaping from, but not what we escape to. And for me, any work that moves me to escape into my own imagination, which is, I believe, the only realm in which radical change or radical ideas that come to us. It's only place for those things to be born, for the changes we want to see, the words we want to create in the world, in hopes that those stories create some type of systemic change. And so to me, I have this kind of love affair with Deborah's work, because when I see it, I think that, there is this access I feel to my own imagination when I'm in the presence of it. And I think for me also, because when my husband and I were lucky enough to have a few of her works in our house, it was right around the time I had my first child, and my daughter, I'm not even joking, walks in. We have these 3 pieces in our family room, and my daughter, who is a COVID baby, so she doesn't really have friends, they're her friends, and she walks up to them every morning and says, "Hey girls." and
I love it.
And I have pictures, I'm going to send them to you. And because I started, and even when in the house we lived in before we lived in this one, where we moved those works into it, that's why we moved them into the family room, because originally we were in this kind of modern house, and we had the works kind of facing the entryway of our house because the wall was glass. So when people walked in, it was kind of the first thing they saw coming into our home. But we would find that when my daughter was learning how to walk, she always wanted to be in front of these pieces. And they are her friends. And I want to say that I think that they're her first imaginary friends as a 2-year-old. And so, for me, I think I get from it what she does. I feel that kind of, pathway into what's good in life. What and the possibility of, when children get to be children, and what is there for us in that, and all of these barriers we don't have to our most imaginative spaces within us. And so I think for me, that's why, Deborah's works are so special, because they have so many meanings in my life, in my family. You're such a big part of our family. But also personally, they help me access the parts of myself I need the most, especially during these times.
Oh no, that's great. That's so beautiful. It's strange because I really didn't know which works you guys had until we started doing our archives. And I couldn't believe it, because the works that you have, I remember them all being on the table. Those are my Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon works. I worked in the studio, by myself, works on paper. I don't need my assistants. And I remember laying them all out. One is called by the something of the dove. I can't remember the title. And then one little girl has her legs, like bowed, and it was so beautiful. It talked everything about, milkman, and that whole idea of finding yourself and learning to fly, and what that really means. And I'm so proud that you guys have those. I'm so proud that your daughter loves them, because they just were made out of some special type of love. And I just love Toni Morrison, and just listening to that. I mean, I can see all 3 of those works in my mind right now. It's beautiful. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
That's wonderful. And thinking about the fact that the Cleo, that you're a writer, it is so interesting that the words
really
you chose
actually
were inspired by literature.
It's
Right.
actually freaking me out a little bit, because right now, I don't even know if I'm supposed to talk about it or not, but my next book is currently in a marketplace. We're selling it. And we anchored, when I did the chapters, every chapter is anchored in a Toni Morrison quote.
Wow. Yeah.
And so, and it's
Beautiful.
the works I wrote in this house recently. I didn't think I was going to write another adult book for a while. And then all of a sudden it just came to me one day. I just wrote, 5 themes and about what I wanted to write about. And I wrote a Toni Morrison quote under every single one of them. And then the book just came to me. And so I've been writing it. And so you're kind of freaking me out right now.
It's a good type of freak out.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Were you aware that those works were inspired by Toni Morrison, Cleo? Or is that,
I think I
no,
remember.
Is that not knowledge?
I think I remember now, maybe a little bit. When you're, 2 kids later during the pandemic, and having had COVID and all the things, you're kind of like, your brain is like, what can I even remember? So as you're saying it, I almost felt that kind of like memory of like, oh my God. But it had completely left my psyche that was so. And then I was like, I think I remember that now.
Right. Yeah.
Oh my God. I can't wait to tell Simon. He's going to just freak out.
It seems that they've really kept that presence going in your household.
Oh, they're like the center
kind
of they're like the
the
center of our house. You don't even understand.
That's wonderful. Deborah, are you often inspired by works of literature or poems in your work?
Yes. In fact, I struggle as an artist primarily my whole life until I just started reading Cornel West. I mean, the pre-Obama Cornel West.
Yeah.
And I just fell in love with his words, and my work started to change. And then Bell Hooks, followed that. And I realized I needed more scholarship. So I went to get my MFA, and I started taking class in African American studies. And the more I read, the more I saw how the body was really being perceived, and the beauty of the Black body. It was the missing point of my work. It was the missing link all this time. And once I added the literature, the notion of literature in my work, it just blossomed and it bloomed until the work that you see today. It's so very important in my work, in my practice.
It's like a never-ending sort of font of inspiration that you can dip back into.
Right.
There's
amazing.
It's one of the things that I've been really noticing in this very interconnected global world that we are living in these days is that, there are lots of things that the internet has brought us that, are complicating our lives in many ways. But one of the things it is bringing us is this wealth of information that's being distributed that people who have the curiosity to self-educate and to dip into,
right.
It can become this well of sustenance, right? The information that is out there. And I think what you're describing is part of that. I remember listening to a podcast recently about, girls in Afghanistan under the Taliban finding new power in kind of online educational resources when their, in-person educational resources were limited. And it kind of reminds me that, if we self-educate, if we read, if we look, if we kind of dip into the wealth of what everybody is creating around us, it is sustenance. For each of you, I think that this is something that that you tap into, as well as is present in Kusama's work, that art, whether it be visual or written, can be a form of healing, can be a form of nurturing oneself. And I'm wondering if you have words of wisdom about the creative process itself that you might want to offer our viewers today, about how creativity perhaps can impact life for the better, of how you can get started even.
Okay, I'll start. For me, I have to, if I get stuck, let's say that I can't think of the next body of work or where that work needs to go, and especially when I'm painting or doing things very large. For me to kickstart creativity, I go very small. If I can put everything I want in a small 8x10 or 4x5, then I can do it 8 feet tall. So for me, it's these little process, these little baby steps in order to get it going. And then before you know it, I'm in my flow and I'm able to really just start producing work, just one after the other. Sometimes it just starts coming through. And even better things, it wakes me up at night, tells me to get up and go work. And so for me, it's always been my safe space. When the world, even when I was a young child, and I come from a very large family, and needing my own private space, I found that in art, for me. And it's just been just my thing, this whole time.
That's great. Yeah, I have a friend who is a painter, and she starts every time she goes into the studio, she takes an image maybe that she finds in a book. So she's always ripping apart books, down images, but she starts by painting on top of those.
Right.
She calls it her warm up. and it just kind of gets the juices flowing. And it's this lovely, I always love looking through all of her warm ups, but it's this lovely process that she's developed for herself that, and maybe been handed by some of her teachers as well, that really kind of gets her going and kind of, puts her on track. She doesn't have to feel kind of, what do you call it? Like paralyzed by the blank page, right?
Right. And it can be paralyzed.
Yeah. Cleo, do you have any words of wisdom? When did you start writing? How did you start writing? Is this something that just came naturally pouring out of you?
I went to a poetry summer camp as a little girl. And so, I remember the first day that I went to it was like a kind of creative arts summer camp that I'd gotten a scholarship to. And I was one of the only kids who took the poetry class because there was a kind of like way more like fun things to take, but I felt really drawn to it. And so I took it. And it was like 4 other people. And, but I remember the first day the teacher said, I just want you to write anything on the page that doesn't make sense. And I want you to write something you've never seen before. So think of a bird and every color you've ever seen a bird in. And now I want you to describe the one bird you've never seen. And that was such a powerful practice for me, even as, a first grader so to me, I think this idea to go into the places where things don't have to make sense or something you've never seen before, or now my practice is so much more about simplifying what's complicated. And something I say to my girlfriends all the time, I was like, okay, it's deep and it's not that deep. Like, let's talk about the different levels. Like it is deep and we can go about what's deep, but we can go about what's not that deep. Whether you're talking about the most things that we want to call the most complicated things in the world, like whether it's gun control, all right, let's talk about what's deep and let's talk about what's not so deep. What's not so deep is that people shouldn't have to die this way. Right. Whether you want to talk about things like Israel and Palestine, we can talk about what's deep in the deep and complicated history, but what is not complicated is that people should have the right to live and the right to that autonomy of their selves and their communities. And so for me, I always kind of look to simplify. And when the words don't come, I really take it as a sign to listen and read. And so, I've gone through extended periods of what other people would call writer's block. But for me, they were just moments to dive into my ancestors and read, whether it's, I did a deep dive into Bell Hooks again, when she passed, which I think everyone should just do every 5 years anyway, to just stay human. That's right. When she recently passed, and I read a ton of Toni Morrison after my second daughter, Bayou. Her middle name is Beloved, and so I read a lot of that. And so to me, I think always kind of playing with the energies around you and not creating things, or like the idea of blocks. So whether you're a visual artist, the idea of if the work doesn't come, can you find play? And I think play is always available. As a writer, if the words don't come, where can we find a relationship with words that feed us? So whether that's reading other people's work, listening, calling a friend who may need to hear from that may need to be seen by you, and listening to them.
Yeah, I think there is that sort of reframing that you get through speaking with the people who you treasure in your life and hearing about what they're going through, I think is always really productive in so many ways, right? Calling a friend is always a good idea. We do have a couple of questions that have come in through the Q&A from the audience. So the first one is for Deborah. This anonymous attendee has asked, for me, Robert's work always or also conveys vulnerability and the need to protect, care for the children. And this person wants to know if that's part of your intention or their own vision upon seeing your work. So
No,
is there?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, that's part of my intention because the adultification of Black children is so it's out there in the world, and the way police officers, the way teachers, sometimes the way other people treat them is that if they're not little people, they're not little adults, they're babies. They don't have the life experience to make concrete decisions that may, calm a situation down because they're babies. But if you see them as adults and treat them that way, then you change who they really supposed to be. It's just unfortunate that people do this all the time, and I think it's just so horrible. So I try to create that vulnerability along with that fierceness, because as Black women, we have to, at a very early age, put on those gloves to defend our beauty, to defend who we are, how we walk, how if we're laughing and we're loud, and how that is negatively perceived and it's not perceived with our counterparts. So it's this idea of growing up and being a child that I'm trying to convey into work, and I'm happy that people are seeing that.
That's interesting too with what you're saying. Like, I just keep thinking of, the poem. There's this sense of the child even trying to make their own boundaries, setting their boundaries, and
create space.
Let us create space for them to be children. Let us protect that space for them.
Right.
There's another question that's come in for both of you, asking what makes you feel optimism in dark times. I think this is something that we're all looking for. Do you have tactics?
Optimism, like anything else, is a practice. It's a devotional practice. Like anything else, you want to hold on to it in your life. And so I don't think that it's something we should expect to come naturally, or feel that there's something wrong with us if we feel hopeless. I remember once I heard someone say that depression is sadness without hope. And so in that, where I always think about, where do we find a practice of hope? And I do think that in the practice of hope, a devotion to optimism, and not the delusional kind of, I'm sure it all turns out okay. But the work of hope, the work of optimism, doing what we can wherever we are with our resources. And I think active, having this balance, although I do think balance is a delusion, but whatever, having this energy of action, and also knowing and giving and doing, and also remembering that the giving and doing belongs to us as well, so that the rest and the replenishment is also the action of optimism, just like whatever it is you may need to do in your community or your family, or how you're raising your kids, or how you're reparenting yourself, or how you're conversating with your elders, the people around you. And so I think that the doing, whether it's doing for oneself, in that heart work, or in the community. But I do think that, love, optimism, like love being kind of an action word is important.
I like that you're talking about it as devotional work. I think that that's a very key way. Sometimes we expect optimism and hope to just kind of come on its own, but something that we actually have to very intentionally put into practice for ourselves. Deborah, what about you? What keeps you going in hard times?
I don't know. This week was really hard with what happened in Uvalde. It's tough. I mean, you want to think that human beings are ultimately good people, and I consider myself a humanist. So I think that there's good in everyone in the end. But we have things like what happened this week, and it just draws you down, and thinking about those beautiful children, and they had so much hope that morning, and you just hope God's grace, took them quickly. And so I don't know. And down times, I try not to take it all in. You have to piecemeal it into your life. but I think I'm in good spirits most of the time. I think there's humor in almost everything, not everything. And I try to find that humor. And most of that humor is me. There's a lot to laugh about me. So I kind of turn it inward to kind of encourage myself to, you can do better, you can be better. Or, I was going outside this morning, I almost fell down. It was like, oh, now you're going to break your leg before you have to go to London, So things like that, to try to keep the balance, because I can really go deep and dark into these works that in a way culturally that I don't want to go into. So I just have to kind of keep things on the surface.
Put yourself
Yeah. But it reminds me of that the one of the, because I have it written down right here because it is one of the quotes from the book, but the Toni Morrison quote where she said, "It is not possible to constantly hold on to crisis. You have to have the love and you have to have the magic. That's also life."
That's right.
And I have that written on posted on my desk every day, because the love and the magic is in living in that energy too, as a devotional practice. That's also life, and that's optimism. I'm sure in ways.
I think that's a great thing to look at every day, a good mantra to repeat. It's good to have these words of wisdom that we call from all around us to accompany us through our days. Well, thank you both. This has gone very quickly, but I think it has imparted us with some optimism to move forward through this day with. So thank you to both Cleo and Deborah for joining me today. It's been such a pleasure. And thank you also to Theodore, Coffee, and Joy for their assistance with interpretation and captioning today. And finally, a big thank you to our audience for joining us. I hope you will all come to the Hirshhorn and visit the Yayoi Kusama exhibition, as well as the other important exhibitions we have on view with work by Laurie Anderson, Mark Bradford, Nicolas Parti, Marcel Duchamp, and Sam Gilliam, whose exhibition of new paintings just opened this week. Finally, please mark your calendars for the upcoming exhibition, Put It This Way, Revisions of the Hirshhorn Collection, which will feature Deborah Roberts' powerful work Fighting the Ism, among many other works by nearly 50 women and non-binary artists. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great day.
Yes, thank you.